Can you hear me now? I am speaking. Well, that's just great. Apparently, I was streaming for like, I don't know, 15 minutes or so, and there was absolutely nothing except that picture of Fuji. So, yeah, riveting content. All right, let's record a bit more here until I'm. Oh, let's see. It's not an easy way to check in your own stream. Well, the setup I have, I'm not actually streaming from my laptop here in the closet. It's basically sending this setup here to my desktop, which is actually doing the streaming. And so from where I am right now, everything looks fine. And before I went into the closet here, everything on my desktop looked fine because it was just that image of Fuji, because I turned that off and on here on this laptop like this. Yeah. So yeah, that's a thing. But yeah, good to note to self. Next time when I turn that image off, I should open the door and look over at my desktop and see if it's actually gone. Shouldn't be that much of a delay, I think. I thought it had it set up to be like just a few, like couple seconds. Huh. Alright. Yeah, I guess it's not completely awful. Hmm. Yeah, no, thank you for pointing that out, especially the fact that I was just a mountain for a while with no sound, because that kind of defeats the point. All right, I'm gonna record a little more till I mess up again, which, could be seconds. He abruptly shifted footing, then leaped from a standing position to a damaged building. The building toppled as he used it as a stepping point to lunge for the source of those other beams. His moves were raw efficiency. Oberon was power and speed, sheer ability and a weird kind of grace, if grace could be used in the same context as raw power, mass, and shockwaves being produced on landings. Titan Nemian resembled a martial artist in some ways as he streamlined everything he did. No wasted effort, 100% awareness of what his form was doing. He spun, turning quickly, and I almost missed seeing it. The violet beam slashed out, striking at his hand, following something in the air. The beam stopped short instead of continuing down to hit the city because it touched something. I flew to one side and felt the air woof as it whipped past me. A dark, ice-crusted bit of concrete chucked my way surreptitiously. A second woof a moment later, lower impact because I'd moved further away, and it traveled a slightly different course. That would have ended me. The card up his sleeve now spent, he wasted no time in repeating the effort. I saw Crystal and my Aunt Sarah use force fields to block or deflect chunks of concrete I couldn't even see in the gloom. I'd run into a wannabe ninja who hadn't thrown actual ninja stars with the accuracy. I'd run into a wannabe ninja who hadn't thrown actual ninja stars with the accuracy this monster was hurling slabs of concrete and roofing. Okay, got it. Force fields to block or deflect chunks of concrete I couldn't even see in the gloom. I'd run into a wannabe ninja who hadn't thrown actual ninja stars with the accuracy this monster was hurling slabs of concrete and roofing. I shot it, training my laser on it in hopes of putting it off balance. The beam had no recoil when I fired, but it did have an impact as it struck home. Arms around its head, hand still placed roughly in the beam's way, it crashed through a building that was already toppled, and dust exploded around it as it brought its arms out to either side. This time, my warning wasn't even a laser touching the projectile, a momentary flash of red across the sky. I dropped out of the air, because down was the only direction I could move quickly while lugging the gun around. Even though I was falling through the air with no connection to the earth, I could feel the vibrations in the air as it started running. I looked, and I didn't see the Titan, but I did feel the vibrations growing more intense second by second. A trap. I could see the explosions illuminating a city street to my left as Capes opened fire on the Nemean Titan, who had moved around to flank me, using the cover of buildings and rubble while dropping down to all fours to maintain a low profile. Circling around to come at me from an angle I hadn't 100% anticipated. Shitty thing was, it worked. I dove low, and I let go of the gun, swearing under my breath. Had to drop the dead weight while he closed in. Letting it drop to the ground, drop my force field to cut back on air resistance, glance over my shoulder, fly over the crack full speed because he was closing in. Do nothing, the thought was mine, a violent exclamation. A last-second gamble, only because I had no hand to play. I felt him get close enough that his power swept over me. Everything that wasn't automatic was stolen from me. My ability to reach for my power, my ability to move my body, my ability to think. I couldn't put a single coherent word together in my mind's eye. I was all disorganized thoughts and dull terror as momentum carried me through the air, heels overhead, wind catching at my coat, whipping at my face and hood. I followed the instruction to myself, staying limp, not trying to move or use my power. The Nemean Titan stopped at the edge of the crack. I hurtled in a loose arc over the hole between realities, to the far side, where shattered concrete and rubble awaited me, harder than a landing on hard ground. I passed out of his range. My senses were slow to return to me. My sense of my own power was among them. Wait, I thought, glad I could articulate at least a single syllable. Wait. Fly. I took the last possible moment to pick up with flight and found my grasp of it wobbly. A half moment of uncoordinated flying that moved me laterally. The upward flying. Why, thank you. I have literally years of practice at this point. Man, I can give you some links after the fact of my old stuff. The first stuff I did. It's rough. Actually, no, I should go back and re-listen to that at some point. Because I'll bet it's even more rough than I remember. Yeah, I can give you the deets when I'm done here. Yeah, I do remember that. So this would have been from the Worm audiobook. Arc 2 was the first thing I'd ever done. When I finished with the final chapter of the whole story, I went back and re-recorded the first arc because the first arc was A, by somebody else, and B, rough because it was also their first time doing things. And, you know, if the first chapters are rough, it turns a lot of people away. So I did go back and re-record all of that. And I remember that there was a pretty substantial difference between the two, but it would be fun to go back and compare. Because those first few chapters I recorded of Arc 2 were done with an $8 microphone that was just garbage. I'm trying to remember if I even recorded in a closet at that point. That might have just been done at my desk. A half moment of uncoordinated flying that moved me laterally. Then upward flying, breaking my momentum. The air pushed hard against me as I hit the ground. Gilded knee pads. Wow, alright, that didn't last long. Yeah, man, closets are like premium. Although, you can make it work. I used to only record in walk-in closets because, well, we needed them. We were in an apartment and we kind of had all our stuff in there. I'm literally in a regular, coat closet right now. Heavily modified, mind you, but yes. It is like a little fort. Little fort where no one can hear you scream. I mean, what? A half moment of uncoordinated flying that moved me laterally. Then upward flying, breaking my momentum. The air pushed hard against me as I hit the ground. Gilded knee pads, boot toes, and gloves scraping against icy road as I landed on the far side of the crack. He loomed on the far side, head bent, while I panted for breath, because I hadn't been able to breathe while doing that. Something below had his attention. I was worried he was about to dive in, and I had no fucking idea what to do if he tried it. Hesitantly, halfways hoping I'd get his attention in the course of it, I inched closer to the edge. We'd picked an entry point where the highest point of the crystal landscape met the lowest point of our landscape. The crystals were close to the surface, and it felt almost like they were putting individual, smaller scenes together to create the shadows and paler sections to pull the larger images together, because the Titan was large enough to warrant something huge. A boy, blond with a cut on his chapped lips, boot on the side of a girl's face. Boy and girl because they weren't any older than Roman or Juliet. He held a narrow pair of scissors inside the girl's ear canal, his boot hiding her expression, though her hands reached up to grip at his ankle and the toe of his boot as he leaned on her. An adjustment of the scissors made her flinch, freeze, then stop. She didn't move again as he removed the scissors and began snipping hair away from the side and back of her head. Kinky locks of hair wound into locks with gold wire fell to the floor. A prolonged scene. The fighting between titans was ongoing in the background, but the Nemean titan didn't move. He stopped when there was nothing left to snip. He looked back, off screen, then took the scissors, still with lengths of hair sticking out around the place where the blades connected. Didn't move. He stopped when there was nothing left to snip. He looked back, off screen, then took the scissors, still with lengths of hair sticking out around the place where the blades connected, and hesitated. His expression, distorted because it was painted across an uneven surface, looked concerned for a moment. A moment later, he stuck scissor blades into the ear canal in one abrupt, smooth motion, deep. His victim reacted, thrashing, body arcing. Her face was visible for only a moment, and it was a dull blur. Not something the agent had recorded for posterity. He brought his boot up and back down in a hard kick against the side of her face, knocking her out, maybe mercifully. The scene tilted like the camera floated underwater, unsteady, overcompensating, taking in more. A young victor used the toe of his boot to move the victim's head. Half-shaved, half of it scuffed and bruised, blood in the ear canal, the other half left alone. A man I didn't recognize or know, older, put his hands on young Victor's shoulders. 2 girls, roughly his age, approached, one of them with a smudge of blood around one nostril, a bloody handprint on her shoulder. Too old to be Rune. Wrong face shape to be Othala. Nostril. A bloody handprint on her shoulder. Too old to be Rune. Wrong face shape to be Othala. Maybe the younger girl was Othala. Maybe she came in later. Behind them were men, a group all standing together, attacking a family in their own home, outnumbering them because they were fucking cowards. Welcome to Empire 88? More likely welcome to the clans, an induction for the younger generation. Ugliness creating ugliness. Gold letters appeared across my vision. "You can shoot now, ASAP when you get your gun." I nodded for Lookout's benefit. I watched the scene, the group, the body of the girl lying on a kitchen floor, another woman sitting against the corner, maybe unconscious. My adolescent anger at Empire 88 felt so petty. I'd seen the aftermath of beatings, I'd argued it, I'd hated them, but I hadn't seen it or lived it. Always a background thing I'd gone out of my way to confront or meet. It just felt bad that it was such a big thing, seeing it, but it had occupied so relatively little of my thought space, which, I felt, was still better than living it by perpetuating it. I looked across the chasm at the Nemean Titan, who was distracted by a shift in the distant battle. He looked back down at the chasm, at a scene of himself, a little older, at a stove with a cast-iron pan in front of him. He moved away, attention taken by the fighting, and the scene moved away with him. "Do you have any regrets now?" I thought. "Do you feel 1/10 as ugly as I feel, having this stuff exposed for the civilians to see? Is that part of you there? I hope some dim part of you realizes that this is now how people will remember you." Okay. "Having this stuff exposed for the civilians to see? Is that part of you there? I hope some dim part of you realizes that this is now how people will remember you." The images of Nemean had receded, and other ones appeared. Rain killing Snag. The silver line, the cut. The aftermath, when he fell to his knees by Snag's body, broken mechanical arms limp beside his ordinary ones. The other members of the team making their way, our way, to his side, to support, encourage, or so it appeared. Different, I thought. Me as Glory Girl, facing down a thug. He struck me, hit the force field, and did nothing. I raised my foot, preparing to kick him in the hip. He shielded himself with his hands ready, backing up. It didn't matter. Flight got me close. Strength, like I could manage, didn't care about what he did. The kick sent him skidding 10 feet, ruined his hands while the kick still dislocated his leg from the socket of his hip. The sudden movement of his lower body had been enough to do some minor damage to his spine, or so my sister would later tell me. I'd stayed there, talking to him, taunting, until my family had arrived, Uncle Neil and Dad. No reprimands, no punishment, just a hand on my head, eliciting an annoyed look from me to my Uncle Neil, where I tried to fix my spiked tiara. Different, I thought again. They deserved it. Scenes flowed like water, always related in subtle ways. Always, depending on where we looked, the landscape was consistent for a given location. Students of misery, yes, but specific miseries. This was a landmark point in the agent's stories of physical ruin, maimings, and destruction. At least for this sub-network. The landscape far below us was cracked too. It had its own gaps and chasms. Okay. At least for this sub-network. The landscape far below us was cracked too. It had its own gaps and chasms. What lay below us wasn't an endless plain, but a series of islands. What the Titans were doing was connecting the islands together into a discrete whole. "We're waiting for you guys to make a move. When you do, I say go, and other teams use bombs." I looked over at the Nemean Titan. He stood near my gun, but didn't target it. I was almost more worried the capes who were bombarding him with powers would trigger something. "I know you can't get to it yet." I looked down. Some of the images reflected people in the crowd, people who we'd sent down there. I saw Love Lost eviscerating Teacher's cape in the Teacher's old base. Some of the people there, or the way they stood there, were a reflection of the images. Pulling back, helping less, grouping together, talking. Wondering just who they were working with, what they were doing. I'd bid them to come, and they'd seen some monstrous parts of me. Monstrous when devoid of context. Monstrous even with context, too. The Nemean Titan tried to leap to get closer to a cape. Force fields barred his way. It was my opening. I chased, flying over the gap, mindful of the marker Kenzie had put around the Nemean Titan that let me and the rest of the team see the estimated range. I could only hope that a stray blast wouldn't hit the gun before I got there. In my haste, I tackled the thing, flying right into it, finding handholds and using momentum to get it moving by scraping the top side of it against the ground. Heels, feet, force field faces and other parts of me dug into the ground and snow to find leverage more than I aimed to stop outright, even though I was skidding toward the Nemean Titan's range. I found the leverage, lifted the thing up, and started flying. I waited until I was more or less out of range of the Nemean Titan before I started shooting him. The Titan whipped something at me. 3 somethings. I could see amid the orange and yellow of fiery explosions. I veered to one side and pulled back on the trigger, shooting somewhat blind in an effort to hit the incoming projectiles. I hit one and shifted direction, turning my back to things while putting my body between the gun and the incoming chunks of rubble. I heard them, but didn't see them. No contact. Without turning back around, I flew forward over the crack. In 5. 3 seconds. 4. That tremor caught my finger again. I held my breath. 3. The bombs they'd planted in the crystal landscape went off, 3 points below. It felt like the world stopped. A shudder ran through me, in a way I hadn't ever felt. Like feeling your stomach drop during a roller coaster when you'd never felt your stomach drop before. feeling your bones rattle from an impact when you'd never been that close to an earth-rattling explosion or collision. Not my bones, not my body, and not my flesh. Need more. 2. The horizon was pink flesh, illuminated by 100 different powers with different lighting around them, if they had any lighting at all. Titans fighting, capes fighting with everything they had. Except the lights had gone out. They'd all felt that impact too. The fighting had stopped for one moment, as everyone found their equilibrium, and the only lights that remained were from silver fire that kept burning in patches, or glowing constructions that still hung in the air. Minions that hadn't disappeared when their masters lost their focus. 1. I almost fired on 1, but the ellipses stopped me. Again, my finger shook. Scotty appeared near me. I was anticipating her and let myself fall to buy myself seconds. She was a skyscraper filled with fury and violence, dropping in next to me with no warning, tipping my way. So, instead of merely dropping, I flew down, adjusting the speed of my descent so the blade cleaved the air above me. Fury and violence. What happens when we obliterate the library where they store all their memories of violence and ruin? Go! Still falling, I pulled the trigger, and I went from seeing gold letters against a black and red backdrop to seeing the Stygian blue aftermath of those letters and the golden beam. The initial impact elicited that same shudder as before, though it felt like it came from a different direction. The bulk of Scotty beside me reacted. She hit the edge of the crevice, found her equilibrium, and slashed for me again. This time, I slowed my fall, best I could. It hardly mattered, because she crashed through the crack. I did my best to steer upward and break the fall while still aiming on target. For 2 or so seconds, I was off target, hitting the ground 5 to 10 feet near the blast zone. I found my target for 2 more seconds. The laser punched through. It was like pressing my hand flat against a wall, pushing and feeling the hand go all the way through. Except the feeling of breached reached through me, was me. My fragile agent, my power. The strength went out of me, in a very different way than it had when I'd been flying into the region below. That had been like I'd been swimming through muddy water, getting thicker as I went down. This was more like swimming and finding my arms and legs just didn't have the strength. I hurried to get closer to terra firma, feeling that strength bleeding out. In the distance, the wall of flesh collapsed, breaking under its own weight. Oberon was enmeshed in hand-to-hand combat with the other flesh creature and collapsed as it did. Ophion tipped over. A figure in the background, black as night from head to toe, with something like TV static buried deep within itself, dropped, and landed with enough force that shoulder sheared from torso. Scotty, who had appeared too late, was gone. I aimed for it, firing. The beam lanced out, bright against the darkness, and sheared off part of its head. No strength, no durability. I felt the gun move, my hand involuntarily shifting, unable to point directly at it. It was regaining some strength. Hit them! Oh, did I? Oh, I did. I blew out. Damn it. Hit them! Yep. Blew out. Okay, I gotta lower the gain on this. Unable to point directly at it. It was regaining some strength. Hit them! Alright, how'd that sound? Hit them! Yeah, good enough. Yeah, I don't know if it came through well there, but when you blow out the waveform like that, it's real bad sounding. directly at it. It was regaining some strength.
"Hit them!"
I screamed the words, hoping others would hear. The gun's shuddering as it streamed out its golden laser got worse, and with my powers being weak, the force field wasn't strong enough to take it. With it gone, my flight went too. I and the gun dropped the last 10 feet to Earth. The landing was rough. The gun wobbled on landing, and the barrel nearly brained me. Lying on my back, staring at the night sky above me, I closed my eye, holding it closed until wow, just super flubbed there. The landing was rough. The gun wobbled on landing, and the barrel nearly brained me. Lying on my back, staring at the night sky above me, I closed my eye, holding it closed until Kenzie's camera display came up. I navigated through, checking on the others. Sveta had collapsed, her limbs and lower body a spaghetti tangle of very flat tendrils. A number boy was very close to her, kneeling. Whippersnap wasn't far either. Tristan was grimacing, a blur tearing across part of his body, blue shades dancing with red ones. Other capes all around them were struggling, trying to find their equilibrium. And Rain. In trying to get to him, I saw a glimpse of what Kenzie had been trying to capture on displays to send out to others, alongside Kenzie's hands, poised above the keyboard, doing nothing. She was saying something, going by how her head moved, the glance to her right at Chicken Little. That display showed the map of connections between Titans, a map of gray tendrils and bright white straight lines, a red X between two. I looked over at Rain, moving on to the next viewpoint. It wasn't his eyes I saw through, but an external view of the space beyond the dream room. He was out there with Colt, next to a crystal pillar, working. Love Lost stood on a ledge, looking out over the side. One of the agents from within the system had felt what we'd done, much as the Titans had. We'd hit them where it hurt all of them. And, in the doing, we'd thrown our own powers for a loop. I could feel my powers stirring, struggling to find their way back to even footing. I didn't push the fragile one to perform. Instead, wincing as I was forced to put weight on my foot, I tended to the gun, checking it over. 1 rough catch, 2 short falls. I couldn't keep treating it like this and expecting it to perform. The stranger was starting to draw near now, or its range was increasing back to what it had been. I could tell because the area I couldn't bring myself to look at was shifting, growing. They were recovering faster than we were.
"That didn't not work."
I used eye movements and blinks to slowly navigate the menu back to the perspective where I could see Kenzie. In the course of getting there, I saw Sveta pulling herself together. Tristan wasn't blurry or hurting anymore. Tristan's viewpoint looked out over toward the Titans. Scotty was off in the distance and was hurt with one arm limp at her side and wasn't healing the hurt. Ophian water. And was hurt with one arm limp at her side and wasn't healing the hurt. Ophian impaled Oberon, but the impaling spines were slower, shorter, weaker than before. The impaled Titan flesh formed tumors, but the tumors were small.
"They were trying to take over each other's networks when we hit them. Damage rippled through."
Capes were mobilizing. Tristan was urged to head over toward the stranger Titan. I wished our side was recovering faster.
"Rain gets a quiet couple of minutes to mess around in the internals."
That was good. It could be what we needed.
"Scotty isn't part of Oberon network anymore. Independent."
That was the red X, I assumed. Okay. I gave lifting the gun a try. I was annoyed by the stranger Titan's approach, moving faster. The fragile one was still too weak. So I floated, mindful of the stranger Titan's reach and power. I kept a building between myself and my best guess of its location. Too close. I watched the fighting, tense, waiting for the point our side recovered, and hoping we'd bounce back to 100% before the Titans did. If the Titans could. As best as I could figure it out, we'd nuked them right in one of their capital cities, but we'd still dropped a nuclear bomb on the same continent in which we all lived.
Getting first reports in. Powers are different.
Different how? I asked the night air.
Subtle changes to a lot of capes. Within TTSE, whatever that means. More info to come. Be safe, love you.
I knew what it meant, but I wasn't in a position to address the team. TTSE was power testing terminology. Training, tolerances, second, evolution. Capricorn would know it. Powers were weird. Powers changed over time. They could be trained with meditation or practice, certain uses pulled out. They could be strained to certain limits, and those limits weren't just raw power, but included duration and range. They changed as our mood did, as we got closer to certain triggers. And some were just meant to change by certain metrics. In effect, powers were different, but not in any drastic ways that challenged baseline expectations of where a power might go with training or mood. I reached out with the fragile one. I couldn't tell, but I still had the control. Still with me? I could feel the stranger getting closer. A little nervous now, I flew down to the ground, to the gun that I'd left there. I knelt atop it and unfurled the fragile one. Hands didn't reach handholds.
Are you weaker? Smaller? What happened to you?
The stranger drew ever closer, and I felt a bit of panic. I didn't want to leave my gun behind, but if I gave him another 20 seconds, he'd be on top of me or my gun, and I wouldn't be able to turn my attention or reaching hands toward my weapon. Force field fingernails dug into the gun's housing. The hands that needed to be in certain places to pull triggers and hold the thing found those places. Sorry, gun, I thought. I lifted it, and metal creaked. I didn't trust myself to fire it like this. But I brought it with me, and I scrammed, flying into the shallowest parts of the crack for visual cover from the stranger Titan. I could hear the fighting resuming, powers partially or wholly back. Titans, as far as I knew, still limping. People in the landscape below were moving now, and they were fortunate in that they hadn't really stopped while the rest of us had been reeling. Helicopters and trucks were audible, all in the one direction. I kept an eye on them. I'd made sure they were safe to evacuate, distract any of the other Titans. Oh, no, I'd make sure. I would make sure. Helicopters and trucks were audible, all in the one direction. I kept an eye on them. I'd make sure they were safe to evacuate, distract any of the other Titans, and then reunite with my team. Crystal and Aunt Sarah found me, falling into loose formation with me. It made me feel a hell of a lot better.
All Titans except 2 were hit by that.
Oh God, how do I do that typo? We're hit by tat. Hit by tat. Hit by tat. Falling into loose formation with me. It made me feel a hell of a lot better.
All Titans except 2 were hit by that.
Arachne, I whispered. One of the ones who wasn't linked in. Hunter.
And? Titan Fortuna disconnected just before the blast. Reconnected, untouched. Titan Fortuna is heading toward Shin, toward Chris.
Oh wow, that was actually a somewhat short chapter. It was only 40 minutes. All right, dead air. Okay. Oh, they're usually like an hour long. Yeah. This arc so far has seemed to be relatively shorter. I seem to recall them being shorter when I read it. Um, but yeah, usually chapters the past several arcs have been about an hour, which takes me about an hour 20 to record. Um, I would record a second chapter tonight, but it's 8:15, and I need to eat some food. So I will only be recording the one. 19.2, oops, 19.2 infrared. Yep, save. Food stream when? I don't think I'm going to do a food stream ever. Eating is gross. Nobody should ever do it. The soothing eating sound. So eating ASMR? Oh god, what would the worst? Like, oh god. Like pudding? Eating pudding ASMR? No, that's not that bad. Um, oh my god, something like chewy and mucky. And I'm drawing a blank. Oatmeal. Oh, oatmeal ASMR. God, that would be horrific. I'm sure. There's a market for that out there. Mm. Oh God. Oh shoot. I did some of these things in the wrong order. Ba, ba, ba. Split this out. Oh, interesting. It doesn't show any of the drop downs. In the stream. Weird. So it just looks like I'm randomly clicking on stuff. It doesn't even show the loading, like, pop up. I don't know. It's very, very strange. I mean, I can understand, like, pop-ups, sure. Like little pop-up windows, because they're technically separate from the main window of the application, but, like drop-down menus? That seems kind of weird. Oh, it's so warm in this closet. Holy crap. Oh my god. Oh no. A separate program for every drop-down menu. Good thing you can only open one at a time. Bag of ice. Oh, that actually wouldn't be a bad idea. Especially as we get into the warmer months. Recording in the summer is always terrible. It's so, so warm. I really want to make. So there's a product called Whisper Room. It's just a little like recording booth that you can set up in your own room. But it's a full like sound dampening enclosure and all that. But they have an air circulation system that is silent, and there's a way they do it by having like they use I think it's rubber tubing, and they have it go in like 180-degree bends, um, and somehow I don't know. There's some way that that prevents the sound of the fan and anything else coming in, and the same for the exhaust. Which I would like to make something like that for my closet here, because just some airflow would be great. Just get a little bit of fresh air from the office next to me into this closet would be mighty nice.
Titan Fortuna disconnect.
All right, yeah, sounds good. Yeah. Yeah, whisper rooms are very cool, but they're also very expensive. Which, I got a closet. I'm good. Why does this never go to the places I want? I just want to save the file. Why can't you remember where you were last time? 19-02-raw. Phew. I'm hungry. Oh, hey, water. Water's like food. I'm trying to think. There weren't a lot of voices in this chapter. There was Kenzie's like visual overlay that I don't go full Kenzie voice for. I tone it down a little bit. I dislike doing Kenzie's voice. It's very high and very energetic. Also, not a big fan of the character in general. But anyway. But yeah, I'm trying to think. Was there anybody who spoke in this chapter aside from Victoria and the Kenzie overlays? This is like a very narration-heavy chapter. Yeah, I guess it was just Victoria and the Kenzie overlay. Yeah, so Kenzie's voice is more like where there was one that had a longer block. Yeah.
Subtle changes to a lot of capes within TTSE, whatever that means. More info to come. Be safe, love you.
That's Kenzie's voice. It's just it requires a lot of focus to maintain that pitch and energy, because she's a very very like basically hyperactive person, and yeah. It is one of my more different voices, though, so I don't mind that aspect of it. Part of the problem with doing a like thing based in the real world in the like Northeast U.S. is that there's not a lot of like I basically just have to vary like slight speech patterns and pitch, because because there's like basically no accents, you know, and there's no characters that are ever mentioned being overseas, like from overseas or anything, or like, you know, there's no fantasy characters where I can do like weird voices. It's just all normal people. I mean, it's not too bad. Like, of the main cast, this is Victoria's voice. It's most similar to my own voice. Um, Kenzie's voice, of course. Rain's voice, which is fairly, I don't know, open throat, I guess. Uh, Sveta's voice, which is more mature sounding. Tristan's voice, which is deeper and more commanding, and his twin brother Byron, which is more meek but also deep. I feel like I forgot somebody. Oh, and Ashley. Ashley, who is very murderous and violent. I think that's the main cast. Yeah. Let's see. Do I have all the things saved? I believe I do. Practicing voices. One tip I got a long time ago was like listen to the radio and try and mimic whatever voice the person's saying, or listen to audiobooks and try and mimic the voices that person does, and use that to kind of inform your own development of voices. Like you get a feel for how the voices are mapped in your own head. And for me, it's like I don't know if I could draw it. I have like a mental dial in my head where different voices are. Um, like Rain's voice would be straight left. Um, Ashley's voice would be straight right. Victoria's would be straight right at about like 2 o'clock, like 2:30. Sveta is like 1:30, and Kenzie is like 1. Tristan is about 7 o'clock. Byron is 6 o'clock. Uh, and let's see, Chicken Little would be right around like 10 o'clock. Chicken Little's voice is like this. Um, and then I've also got like the more authoritarian, commanding voices like Defiant's voice. It's deep like Tristan's, but more commanding. Which is like an 8 o'clock in my head. Yeah, it's weird. Did I get this thing saved as I was supposed to? Yeah, I mean, it does take practice, just to be able to identify. Yeah, exactly. To learn to make the different to pitches and voices and just get them locked in so that it's easy for you to switch to them. Um, yeah, it just takes practice. Which, you know, if you sit around in a car a lot, you can just start talking to yourself a whole bunch. Yeah, keeping them consistent is very important for uh, listener comprehension. Okay, so. I don't know, what's your favorite book? Oh, okay. I was gonna be like, if it's Twilight, I'm gonna freaking smack you. World of Worlds would be fun, actually. I should do that once I'm finished with Ward. And I mean, given the length of Ward and Worm, like just about everything is a walk in the park. Like World of Worlds is what, probably a couple 100,000 words, if that. Wow. It's only 14,000 words. That's that's like 3 chapters of Wild Bow's work. Holy crap. Yeah, that's totally doable. I don't think about it. I'm not sure I've ever actually read it. Oh yeah, I mean, when you look up word counts for books you've read in the past, like it always feels way longer, like way high, like way higher than you thought. Um, I think the entirety of Lord of the Rings was like 700,000 words. Um, which those are thick boy books. No, not even. It's short of 600,000. Yeah, Worm is 1.6 million, and Ward is 1.95 million. The Worm audiobook was 174 hours of content, which means Ward is going to be probably 200 hours of content. Dear God, that's a lot. Now that I think about it, I guess it makes sense. It's been what 3 years of doing this for me now. I think late 2017 is when I started organizing it. Wait, what year is it? 21. Oh yeah, printed form. Somebody actually printed out a copy of Worm, like their own personal copy, because they're not able to, you know, do that and distribute it. But they wanted their own personal copy and they printed it out, and it was chonky. Yeah, it was very chonky. I think there's been a lot of like community uh, designs on where it should be broken out into separate books. And I think there was one that broke it out into like 3 separate books, and I think that's the one they followed. And yeah, it was just each one of the 3 was huge. Yeah, they're very daunting. Usually, when recommending these stories to people, you don't lead with how long it is, because when you tell somebody you're recommending a 1.6 million word book to them, they usually go, "Ain't nobody got time for that." And then you hear stories of people who started reading it and finished it in like 5 days. And it's like, A, how fast do you read? And B, did you eat and sleep at all? I mean, I think when I first read Worm, it was after it had been fully released. It took me like a month of reading probably a few hours a day. I'm also not a fast reader. I've always read with a like internal voice, um, which has probably helped me with my audiobook work. But yeah, I'm not a very fast reader, but still, it was a commitment. Yeah, apparently a lot of people don't read with an internal voice. They're able to like just I don't know, read words and internalize them. I I can't do that. I read things in voices, all of them in my head. Like it just yeah. I have a lot of voices in my head is what I'm trying to say. All of them telling me to burn things. I mean, what? Oh, interlude. All right, well, I got to get going. I got to eat some food. Thanks for stopping by and chatting. I shall catch you later. I will endeavor to try.